Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Hello, welcome magical ones. Happy festive season. I hope you're all having a magical Christmassy time, though I do know lots of what I call material for our liberation, aka healing responses, aka all the stuff can show up at this festive time. So if you're feeling exhausted and burned out in all the chaos, that makes so much sense, and I am loving you deeply in that. Oh my goodness, do we have a brilliant guest today? What I will say about this episode is that it is one that you will want to listen to right to the end, because perhaps the two juiciest points, although all juicy, came right after we had said goodbye. So just be prepared to know that the goodbye in this episode is not the final goodbye. We extended our talk beyond it. And I know you're going to love what was captured right at the end. I've been feeling such a deep sense of gratitude for this work recently. I've been guiding women in our lunar journey to reclaim their magic, and honestly, it's gone deeper than ever before. And it's such a deep honor and privilege to walk with secret witches, secretly magical women as they open to their magic. And I've been contemplating, because of that, what's going to be most serving for secret witches moving forwards. Hearing a lot of your requests. Speaking to a lot of women about what they need, how we can meet them. And so if you are a secret witch who really wants to learn to open to your healing gifts and create a more magical life, but that feels terrifying, and maybe you're thinking, I need to heal myself, I want to learn how to heal myself first, and this is really about learning the art of self-healing. And I have something very exciting coming in 2025. I'm going to be birthing the Secret Witch Apothecary membership for women who, like me, have felt that same kind of trappedness of living a dull, grey, boring, mundane life, feeling burned out, struggling with people pleasing, struggling with feeling hypervigilant and overwhelmed by maybe anxiety or by your empathic sensitivity, whilst also knowing that you have some otherworldly, magical gifts that you sense could help others heal. And maybe you're longing to create space for that, but also struggling to create space, to create time to choose that fully because of the fear that comes up as you do. If this is you, I think you're going to love what is coming in 2025. And so I invite you to head over to our website and register your interest by visiting nicolebarton.co.uk/membership. And once you've entered your details, you'll be the first to know when enrolment opens for this new offering, which is super exciting. On The Secret Witch Show today, though, our guest is Yolanda Williams. I love Yolanda. Yolanda is a Reiki teacher and the hostess of the fabulous Reiki Radio podcast. She is an energetic alchemist, also certified in wellness counselling through Cornell University, and her work facilitates new levels of self-connection and reveals the dynamics of mind, body, and energy. Yolanda's classes include Usui Reiki at all levels in San Diego, as well as mentoring and intuitive awakening courses online. In this episode, we explore all things energetic alchemy. We dived into Yolanda's uniquely deep perspective of Reiki, investigating how it can be a powerful portal of inner work and self-awakening that offers healing of the mind, body, and spirit, rather than something external, as Reiki is often seen. We discuss some of the surface level misunderstandings of Reiki and explore the nuances of how we can harness energetic alchemy for ourselves, beyond outsourcing our power to others, to actually peel back the layers of ourselves, see where we're projecting, connect to our intuition, and unlock hidden aspects of ourselves that we may not have seen, including our unique gifts. So let's dive in. Welcome, Yolanda. I am so delighted to have you with us on Secret Witch Show. One of the gorgeous magical women that has journeyed with us both, connected us originally. And I was also recently on your podcast. We had such a juicy conversation that I was like, do you know what? We need to we need to bring this to the Secret Witch Show as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to dive into the magic of Reiki and energetic alchemy, self-awakening. Welcome.
For having me.
Oh, sorry. I think your video's frozen again. I don't know whether it's our end. Let me just pause.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, Nicole.
Oh, me too. Me too. I've been really looking forward to this one. And I think so many secret witches as well will be loving this particular topic. So
Yes.
so I'm very excited to dive in. And I guess what I always usually do is invite women into sharing their stories to begin with, because the whole premise, as you know from our conversation of my healing modality, is that women's stories are so healing for other women.
Yes.
So I believe that we're all archetypal remedies for each other. And so my first invitation, if you are willing to accept it,
Yes.
is to share a little bit of your own journey, and particularly in relation to working more deeply with Reiki and energetic alchemy, as you call it, for self-awakening. I'd love to hear like your own journey with that. So I'm going to pass over to you.
Yes. Okay. Well, it's interesting because, I've been asked that over the years, and I usually start with the introduction to Reiki. But honestly, when I reflect back, it started much earlier than that, as it does for so many of us, right? And, I think of when I was very young, I used to always see this clear pink woman in the kitchen at night. And my mom was very interested in, I would say, like occult arts, but she never spoke to me about it. But the books were always around. So we always had these interesting books in the home. She never talked about what her interests were. And she really gave me the freedom to explore my own beliefs. That was a really big thing for her. So she always told me to, pretty much question everything and follow my own curiosities. So that was a gift. But what happened was, as I got older, when I was very young, I was always thought of shy. She's such a shy child. She doesn't, I would just sit and watch and observe. And as I got into my teenage years, I now know I was even more sensitive to energy. So I would go to environments or meet certain people and totally just withdraw and shut down. But I didn't have a logical explanation as to why. And so fast forward, another international bank. And so to keep my job.
Sorry, we lost you there. When you said
Oh,
fast forward, could you just repeat the bit from fast forward?
mhm.
Sorry, love.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. So fast forward, I was working in finance as an adult, and the division or the company I worked for, the division I worked for, we were bought out by another bank, and I would have had to relocate to keep my job, and I didn't want to move to Texas. So I decided not to. And I took my severance package and went to Europe by myself and had a great time. And then it hit me. I have responsibility. I have to get back to work. And I really, at that time, I didn't want to go back into finance. And I was in my early 30s at this time. And so this one day, I just had this overwhelming anxiety. And I was on my bedroom floor, just like crying, begging the universe, give me some clarity, some direction, help me. I don't know what to do. And this weird calm came over my whole body. And the first thought I had was of this astrologer that I had gone to maybe like 5 to 10 years prior. And I hadn't gone back to her because she was so accurate, Nicole. It scared me. Like she knew things like, oh, your father passed away when you were like 2, or oh, just different points in my life she knew. So in this stress, she was the clarity. So I made an appointment with her, and she was telling me again about, um, according to my chart, I would have done well with helping people transition. And
Mm.
I said, absolutely not. And she also recommended that I have a Reiki session and that I learn to meditate. And so that day I went home, I Googled Reiki, and it sounded really strange. So instead of booking a session, I signed up for a class. So I took
Mm.
Reiki classes and meditation at the same time. And I was blown away by just the experience of energy being so palpable. And I practiced every day. I practiced on my friends. But what I started to recognize is that part of me that was sensitive to energy and environments, there was nothing weird about it. I just didn't understand it before. So I started
Mm.
to understand more of my energy versus what I felt in projection from other people or what I felt when I went into environments. So it gave me this sense of one, self-regulation, but also this power back where I didn't feel like I had to isolate myself or avoid
Mm.
situations. So that was the
Mm.
introduction for me into energy work that made me fall in love.
I love that. There's so much in that. This is going to be a juicy conversation. I can feel it. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I was going to ask you about the pink woman in the kitchen actually, because I read it on your website, and yeah, I was just so curious about symbolism of that actually, which is a
Yeah.
completely left field question. But I'm wondering if there was a symbol of the pink woman in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, you know what's so funny is I would always look forward to. I knew that when it got dark and I was supposed to be in bed, if I stood in my doorway, the kitchen was right across from
Mm.
my bedroom
Mhm.
doorway, I knew that I would see her. But I never went into the kitchen. I never left the bedroom. I would just watch her. And I was amazed by just like how flowy she was. The motion
Mm.
movement of her was captivating to me. And then I will say, when I got to, I think it was 15, was the first time I experienced what a lot of people call sleep paralysis.
Mhm.
Although anyone who has experienced it will tell you that's not what it is. So
Mm.
I started in my teenage years having that experience of feeling energies in the room and not being able to move. And it was very scary. And it happened for years. But interestingly, anytime it happened, if I told my mom, it would stop. Yeah.
Mm.
So now it happens very rarely, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Um, and I've been told a lot by people that actually I'm trying to astral project or come out of the body to have these other experiences, but I haven't allowed it yet. Yeah,
Mm.
so yeah, I
Mm.
mean, it's just again, those are those kinds of things that show us there's so much more than just the material realm, and a
Mm.
lot of times we dismiss these things or we're just told they're weird or wrong or whatever
Yeah.
we're told, but we're given so much evidence that there's
Mm.
so much more than just what we understand of our physical function.
I love that. I'm hearing in that she was a symbol of magic in many ways because
Yes.
she was awakening, or maybe your little girl didn't
Yeah.
need awakening. She was just like, hello, I see you.
Yes. Yes.
That's so gorgeous. I also loved, this is kind of similar to my own journey. I loved that your mum kind of gave you that freedom to like really own having a different worldview, having
Yes.
your own unique worldview. Um, so I think there's almost something in there to explore, but I'm not sure that I can quite name that yet. I think maybe it ties into that piece about the sense of wrongness that we can feel.
Right.
And it sounds like you were given permission almost to early on from your mum to kind of express this magical part of you. Would you say that
Yes.
feels true?
Oh, 100%. Because even when I was a teenager and I would have those experiences and I would ask her, because I just knew that she would understand, she would
Mm.
always tell me, you have to figure it out for yourself. Like it's something
Mm.
that you have to come to understand. So pay attention. So she always encouraged me to have an openness of mind around all
Mm.
of it, to be curious about all of it. And she emphasized a lot. It was important for me to understand myself and
Mm.
my own journey. So
Mm.
yeah,
What
she was
beautiful.
planting seeds, definitely.
Yeah. What a beautiful initiation into like, yeah, really owning your uniqueness. Because I think that's one of the things that secret witches can really struggle with is that sense of, and I think you mentioned that you had also sensed this because of course this is a cultural wound, not just a
Right.
personal one. So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to that. I know we haven't quite got into like Reiki and energy
Yeah.
alchemy and what that is. So I'd like to dive into that as well. But just to start with, because I think this is probably one of the most kind of pertinent fears for the secret witch, is this sense of like this sensitivity to energy being wrong. So I wonder if you can start off by speaking a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I know that part of it, I thought it was wrong because most of the people around me thought it was strange. Like, "What are you
Mm,
talking about? This place doesn't feel good," or, "Why is it this person's so nice? Why do you feel funny around this person?" So it felt like, as I said before, kind of isolating in that how was I having this experience that other people weren't picking up on? So it
mm,
did feel very kind of odd that there were, there was no one I could say, "Hey, do you feel this too? Or are you having this experience too?"
mm,
And so, that made it feel like something was wrong. And then on
mm,
top of that, there were other people in my family, not my mom, who were
mm,
very religious. So they
mhm,
also
mm,
fed me the stories of, anything beyond the material was just like evil and scary. So I
mhm,
had this mixture of story and really, instead of trying to figure it out, I was more afraid and trying to avoid, like, just I don't
mm.
want to feel these things. So
Yeah.
Reiki was the gift in that it made me become curious about energy rather than afraid. And
Mm,
it made me become curious about myself instead of thinking something was wrong.
yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
love
and that
that.
is again why I love it so much. It'll always be. And I've studied many things because all
Mm,
of this just made me curious about us as a whole.
mhm,
Like what
mhm,
are we capable of? How is it that we truly function? What is our relationship to energy and the universe and each other? Like, what are these connections that we feel? Why do you watch TV and cry because a complete stranger is going through something? Why do we feel each other
mm.
the way that we do? Right.
Ooh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so it's been this love affair, I think, now with energy and
Mm.
falling in love with just the idea of our potential.
Ooh, I love that so much. And I think what you just said actually about almost like growing up with a conflicting mixture of worldviews, like you're
Yes.
wrong, you're not wrong. Like
Right.
that's often even more confusing in many ways,
Yeah.
because there's then we got like such mixed messages. So I love that you pointed to that because, yeah, there's so much unpacking, isn't there, of that kind of sense that we are wrong as sensitive women.
Yes.
I'm very much diving into, we're running a group at the moment called with Luna, archetypal Luna, which is ultimately the symbol of magic. And so that's very much around like our sensitivity. So I
Yes.
want to come back to that because there's something very interesting and unique you said. So remind me to come back to that. But I think before we do go into that, I'd love to just know a little bit more about your definition because my sense is like when you talk about Reiki, it's kind of like there's a deepening in the understanding of Reiki to many other how many other people talk about it. So I'd love to know your definition of either Reiki or energetic alchemy or both or whatever feels relevant.
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah. So when I first was introduced to Reiki and how it is commonly spoken of is this Japanese healing art.
Mhm,
And a lot of classes focus on how we can use this energy to support energetic balancing within other people. There are
mhm.
even symbols that are used, but a lot of it is very externalized in the way that it's understood.
Yes.
And thankfully, there was something in me that felt like, no, there's a deeper layer here. So I
Mm,
ended up studying with several teachers from different lineages. But ultimately, what I found, it was my practice that started to crack open this understanding.
mm,
And then that energy itself became my teacher. On top
mm,
of course, what my teacher shared with me helped me tremendously as well. But what I started to recognize was okay, it's not just this empath in me who wants to save the world and help everyone else. I'm hurting too. And I didn't recognize or realize how much I was holding or how many emotions had been stuffed and repressed. And I'm sure, as you know, when we start working on ourselves, these things start to come up and start to reveal themselves to us. So I started having this experience of, I guess, what many would call the dark night of the soul. But for me, it was like a soul illumination, because it was just like, whoa, where are these tears coming from? Why are these memories coming back up? What is happening? So Reiki for me in a lot of ways did a lot of deep level clearing for me so that I could really truly see myself and have this understanding of myself that I hadn't had at that point in like 33 years, right? And so it started to help me recognize how much story is attached to our identities and how much of our life experience really we just conjure these stories, right? So it was just all of this weird kind of connection and mapping of, do we even know who we are? Like, we're functioning from what people told us we should be. We're functioning from heartbreak. We're functioning from insecurity. We're functioning from all of these levels of things that have covered up so much of just that innocence of our childlike wonderment and our want to explore and our want to be seen and heard and loved and cared for, right? And so Reiki for me was this catalyst to awakening to my identity.
Yeah.
And then as I kept going deeper in the practice and working with other people, it started helping me recognize, like, oh, there's this spark in it. There's something in us, the sameness. It's not, oh, we like the same music or we have the same political views, not the surface stuff. There's something in us that there's this sameness that they always talk about, that connectivity. So then I became very curious about that, of how that aspect exists no matter how we may cover it, or no matter how disconnected we may personally feel from it, but it's also that thing that drives us to heal. It drives us to go, "Well, who am I? What is life about?" It's that thing, that essence that's there, that's always kind of whispering to us, there's more. It's going to be okay. You know. So, it led me into, actually, Nicole, being very curious about intuition, because then it was like, okay, I'm aware of the unseen and I'm starting to feel things in a more tangible way. But how do I translate all of this? And that was part of the issue from my younger self, is I could feel energy, but I didn't know how to translate it. So like I could be around someone and think like, ew, I don't like their energy. They don't feel good. This person feels bad. When really I could have been picking up on, this person was holding on to their insecurity, their fear, their doubt, their worry,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
I love
yeah,
that.
so it's Reiki has just been this, I don't this wrecking ball of sorts that it kind of it deconstructs, but then at the same time, it's the medicine, it's the balm that brings you into the healing. So it's a
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like it's a friend.
I love that. I love that. I love how you described that, actually, because it's
Yeah.
funny. Women who journey with the archetypal remedies call them their friends. So I love that you've just
Yes.
said like Reiki's a friend. It's almost like that's one way in, isn't it? It's one of
Yeah.
the ways in, and there are lots of different ways in. But for you, it was Reiki, and I love the way that you talk about Reiki. I have to say, because as you said, like it can be taught in one particular way, and I've done
Right.
my Reiki masters as well, and so it was like part of my way in as well. But I loved what you said about seeing that Reiki was kind of almost like very externalized.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's been a journey of like internal work that
Yes.
it's taken you on, which
Yes.
may be different to the way that others have experienced Reiki. Because I think one of the things, I think we may have talked about this in on your show, I can't remember, so tell me if we did, but there's almost a sense often, and it's not just in Reiki. I think it's with any kind of healing that we go for. Because when we come into the path of like all the witchy stuff, it's like a cave, isn't it? It's like, oh, look at this, and like opens a box of all these things. But we start to or I did at least, started to interact with things as if like, I'll just go and be healed by someone else.
Right.
And I think that's that kind of externalized perspective of like, okay, I'll go and have Reiki and then I'll be healed. Whereas I think what you're pointing to is that Reiki is almost like the activation that
Yes.
then opens the door into this whole new world, and we're being called to integrate
Yes.
what then comes up in terms of our inner world. So I love that you kind of explore Reiki that way. And it almost like what I'm naming in that is like this sense of like reclaiming our power to heal ourselves.
Yes. Yes. No, 100%. And it's so funny because, we hear all of these things people say, like, uh, the answers are within, or
Mm,
go within, or be the change you want to see. There's all of these quotes and statements that are quite literally telling us,
mm,
go in, right? But we've been conditioned in so many ways to seek outside of us. And
mm,
we think if we have the issue, how could we possibly have the solution? And so
mm,
it's kind of this, like, this confusion around it all. But once you
mhm,
finally do kind of surrender to, okay, don't run away from who I am. There's
mm,
nothing wrong with who I am. And we start to have that compassion for ourselves, then we really get to do the exploration. But I think,
mm,
that's part of it too, especially in this realm of spirituality. There has been an idea for a long time that you being spiritual means like you're this happy,
mm.
know, shiny person or whatever that is. And
Yeah.
so, like, a lot of people will want to not look at the parts that hurt, or will want
Hmm.
to run away from what makes them feel not in relationship to what they think it means to be spiritual, rather than recognizing every aspect of this life journey is a
Hmm.
spiritual journey. Like, this is our spiritual expression, from the material, the non-physical, everything in between. Nothing's outside of that. And again, it's like when we finally do hit that wall, whatever is the catalyst that makes us go, "Well, what have I been experiencing and how have I been
Mm.
understanding it?" It changes us in so many
Mm.
ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, but the way that you reiterated Reiki is that's exactly how I see it.
Mm.
Um, it's why I love it. And I have to tell you, Nicole, this is one of the things I always tell people. The system itself is telling us all of this too. Like, there are
Mm.
different elements within the system of Reiki that
Mm.
are pointing to go within.
Yeah.
So even from the meditative aspect, grounding the mind, having presence of mind, it's telling us to be with ourselves, to be
Mm.
here. The Reiki principles, also known as the Reiki Gokai, those are telling you to be present and to acknowledge your anger, your worry, to still be in your
Mm.
gratitude anyway, to be diligent and to be kind. Regardless of what we're going through, there is still this kindness that exists. There is still this love that exists. But the most fascinating to me is the Reiki kanji. So the original Reiki
Mhm.
kanji, we often see the more modernized version, but the original version, literally the elements in that kanji, from the top down, it starts with rain.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, we'll say it's spiritual rain, or that rain is the Reiki itself.
Mm.
Underneath the rain are these three little boxes or containers that point to us being the empty vessel. We are what catches the spiritual rain.
Mm.
Underneath those
Mm.
three
Okay.
boxes is the symbol for a Miko, which is a female shaman.
Mm.
And in that context, the shaman, the female shaman, is the mediator between the realms, between
Mm.
heaven and earth.
Mm.
So again, it's telling you you're the empty vessel catching the spiritual rain as a mediator between heaven and earth, right?
Mm.
Then underneath that, the bottom half of the character points to rice and steam,
Mhm.
which ultimately is energy, but rice in that context is what nourishes us.
Mhm.
So the spiritual rain comes down, and you know how we cook rice, right? It's like it, and then the rice starts to nourish us. The spiritual rain is nourishing us. And then the steam rises, which is very similar to that awakening or like that depiction we see of like the Kundalini rising, right?
Mm. Mhm.
So the kanji itself is showing us this relationship to spirit, this relationship to
Mm.
higher consciousness. And when we allow it to come in to embody that essence, it awakens at the base of our being and starts to rise, starts to illuminate our
Yeah.
consciousness. There's nothing
Mm.
external about that. Do you
I
see what I
love
mean?
that. I absolutely
Yeah.
love that. And I think one of the things that you spoke to in that as well is that the sense of like we kind of think we have to just like almost like ascend beyond and like
Yeah.
just be in this joyful, peaceful, spiritual, happy state all of the
Yes.
time. And often I think again, Reiki can be innocently interacted with that in that way.
Right.
This sense of what I would call like an ascension path. Whereas what
Mhm.
I'm hearing you describe is very akin to how I would describe like the role of ascension, learning to ascend
Yeah.
and then also come back down into the body and
Yes.
really like, harness that energy for healing, for whatever you want to harness it for, really. But yeah, I think there was the other thing about that was that you were pointing to the sameness and also the difference, which I think again is very much in those realms. Like the
Yeah.
ascension, seeing that we're all part of this greater universal intelligence of life is
Yeah.
like the sameness. And then also we each have our own unique gifts to express
Right.
in this human body. So I love
Yeah.
I love how every guest I speak to essentially has the same map, just
Yeah.
they're exploring it through a different lens, which is part of that uniqueness, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I love that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that before we move on, because there's another question that I want to get to that I know is really juicy. But
Yeah. Well, I would just say to your point, this is why I ended up calling my work energetic alchemy because
mm,
I started, Reiki made me curious about other facets of our function. So, like I said, I'm
yes,
into intuition and I've studied all kinds of things, magic included. And what I started to recognize, even down to tarot cards, everything is pointing to the same thing. It
mm,
all of these philosophies, all of these systems, all of these practices
mhm,
are bringing us home, so to speak. Yeah.
yeah,
And so I love that we have all of these different portals
mm,
of, in all of these different lenses that are helping us to understand
yeah.
ourselves in such a deep way. But yeah.
Yes,
There's
and I think that's also a good point because I also noted down as you were speaking, like this idea of self-illumination or
yeah,
self-awakening, as you're calling it. I call it self-illumination, but ultimately, to me, that feels that what healing really is. I don't
right.
know if that feels like that to you, but it feels like that's
Yes.
the crux of our healing.
Yes.
Mm,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
That's why I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Gorgeous. Well, I definitely want to go into intuition, and I think
Okay.
also intuition and like the body as well, particularly. So there's some questions around that, but there's also this piece that I think ties more into the self illumination. So maybe we'll go here first. Is what you said earlier about how we can project projection versus sensing, I think you named it as. Because I think one of the things that can come up for women who are secret witches, because we're very sensitive, which we've obviously already illuminated, like we can tend to feel like we have to lock ourselves away, like you said earlier. And I know this is a big thing that comes up for many women who are listening, like this sense of like, I'm so sensitive, I just can't fit into the world.
Right.
And then we start to feel like we're taking everybody's stuff on. So I think there's some really juicy exploration around this idea of like projection, which is often, part of the work that I do as well with women. But I think it's so important to, and I think you've got a particularly interesting way of speaking to it. So I'm wondering if you can just
Yeah.
share a little bit more about what you meant by projection versus sensitivity, if that makes sense to you,
Yes.
how I phrased
Yeah. No,
it.
100%. So, I guess the simplest way would be, again, like as a child, I was very quiet and, just observing. I wasn't running wild. I mean, I was with my friends, but
Mm,
especially around adults, I was just more of an observer. And so this label was put on to me as she's shy. And
mm,
so as I grew older, I attached to that label. I claimed it and I lived it in expression. I took it on
mm,
as believing I'm a shy person. So, because of these ideas of like, oh, she's being weird or she's shy or she's this or
mm.
all of those projections, I just took them on as they must be true. But again, then I started living that out as if it were true. And
Mm,
so then my identity became an expression of what other people labeled me as.
mm,
And then when I started in this work, I started to recognize, like, no, I'm just sensitive to energy. And there's for all of us, the women you speak of, it's important for us to come into relationship with our own energy.
mm,
Because once we start to manage our own, then we don't just sponge and take on the energies around us. We can still observe it. We'll still feel it and be aware of other people's energy, but we don't feel that we have to match it or take it on to heal it for them. And that's the
mm,
problem. A lot of times unconsciously, we're just like allowing people's energy, like, come into me so that I can then take this burden for you. And then now I see that you're okay. So there's a lot of unconscious um, acts of healing that happen that actually cause us to want to shut down and run away because it can be exhausting. But
mm,
again, once we start to recognize, like, no, I can be in my strength, I can be in my illumination, and that actually is more beneficial to the people who may be in their suffering rather than me
mm,
matching them. So in this, I started to recognize, all right, I really want to share what I'm experiencing in this work with other people. And the idea came to do a podcast. And this was back in 2013. And at the time, I had never even heard a podcast. I just knew they existed. But again, I was taking that, I'm shy. I don't
mm,
want anyone to hear me. Like, oh God, strangers. And I had to really think, if this matters to me, it has to be more important than I'm shy. So
mm. I
basically,
love that.
I did it. I started the podcast. I didn't know if anyone was listening. I did it consistently weekly for like 2 or 3 years. And then I took a break. In that break, I started getting emails from people saying, I just found the podcast. Are you coming back? What's happening? So I came back. And then for some reason, I started getting all of these interview requests. And I was having the time of my life, having conversations like this with people, with
Mm,
strangers, no less, right?
mm,
And I started to realize that story about me wasn't true. I
mm,
actually love interacting with people. I love talking to strangers. I love these exchanges, and I didn't want to hide anymore. So
mm,
it was like this very clear, like, aha of, wow, I could have kept myself out of an experience and expression that was true to me if I
mm.
decided to stay in that story of what other people told me I was.
Mm, that's so gorgeous. I can just really feel like for the secret witches who are hiding their magic, like
Yeah.
the resonance with that story feels so powerful. And I loved what you said. Like, if this matters, it has to be more important. Like, this has to be more important than that
Yeah.
story. Yeah, there's so much healing in that. I think also occurs to me is how people who kind of label us then also become mirrors for
Yes.
where we are holding onto those beliefs. It's kind of what I said earlier about people are remedies. So I'm wondering if that feels true to you.
Yeah. So interestingly, it's I see everyone in this way now.
Mm,
I'm always curious about especially what people may project onto me or just who they are in their own expression. I'm just
mm,
so curious about, I'm curious about where their own stories came from, but
mhm,
what it's helping me to see or understand, not just about me personally, but about this human experience. And
mm,
then when people do um, express in a way that pokes at me,
mhm,
again, it sends me deep into a curiosity of like, well, why would that bother me? So, for
mm,
example, when I was living in the illusion of being shy, I really was bothered by people who had huge personalities. Like, it was
mm,
off-putting to me.
mhm,
One,
yeah,
because their energy was so big that it was
mhm,
uncomfortable for me, like in a sensory way. It was just like, "Oh god,
mhm,
why are you talking?" Like, it made me wanna go into a hole.
mhm,
But I also I I don't know if I envied their audacity or I just didn't understand it. Like, something about it was strange because it was so different than how
mhm,
I was. And I was always trying to not be disruptive. So it was
Mhm.
like, how dare they come and just be so disruptive, right?
Mhm.
And
Mm.
that was an interesting way of seeing it. But then I got to the point of, why does this bother me really?
Mm.
And it was this thing of like, oh, because I'm afraid.
Mhm.
I'm afraid of being seen in the way that they're being seen. I'm
Mhm.
afraid of taking up space in the room. I'm afraid of, again, being called weird or strange or something, So it's like
Mm.
they were showing me what I was afraid of, essentially. It really wasn't
Mm.
that I didn't like how they were. I envied it in some way because I couldn't embrace it or even play with it for myself,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so now when people have a bigger energy, honestly, like, yes, I still have to like anchor into myself because of the
Mm.
feeling of it,
Mhm.
but I can appreciate it. And I really admire, like, wow, I love how you just have no shame. Just, hey, I am here and I came to be seen. I think it's a beautiful thing, but it's one of those things that give us, I think, a silent permission of like,
Mhm.
all right, so it is okay to actually allow yourself to be noticed. And it is okay to actually use your voice and speak your truth. It is okay to
Mm.
not agree. It all comes down to how we perceive it. Do we
Yeah.
see it as a problem based on stories that were fed to us? Or do
Mm.
we see other people as potentially teaching us what's possible
Mhm.
and even what we want to avoid?
I love
Yeah.
that so much. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's such a powerful way to see the world, I think. And
Yeah.
I think it's something that I arrived to by starting to, I because I was trained in homeopathy, I would then start to look at like what remedy is this person and what remedy is this person, and
Yes.
so I would start to see like people as almost like energy remedies,
Yes.
which is, I think, kind of almost like what you're pointing to there with that kind of energetic alchemy of seeing other people and their projections, as a way into understanding yourself
Yes.
better and the world
Right.
better. I love that
Yeah.
so much. Yeah.
Yeah, if I see your magic and it's not something that I'm yet familiar with or I haven't explored within myself, yeah, it really is. It's so fascinating to me because again, it shows me that there's another layer that is
Mm.
possible that perhaps it even reminds me of Nicole. One time, I met someone, we kind of dated, situationship, I guess you would call it
Mhm.
at best. I don't know. But I was kind of serious. Like I have a seriousness to me.
Mhm.
I do have a playful side, but it's not what's dominant.
Mhm.
And so anyway, interacting with this person, they were very playful in their spirit and they would want to do things and explore in ways that I personally would have
Mhm.
been like, no, thank you. But because I was enjoying the time with them, I allowed myself to step into that realm of playfulness.
Mhm.
And the thing about it was I had the time of my life. But then on the other side, when we were deciding to no longer be in each other's lives, there was a part of me that was like, oh no, now the play is going to be gone. And I had to
Mhm.
remind myself, like, no, they just helped you unlock an
Mhm.
aspect of you that was always there. And you can still be playful without them. Like, they
Mhm.
don't give you the right to be playful. They just
Mhm.
helped you unlock the door to your own playfulness. So
Mm.
again, I think it's all in how we see it. And we can see
Mhm.
how so many people do give us some type of medicine that
Mhm.
we may need, whether we were expecting it or not.
Yes, I love that. Especially if we're not expecting it.
Yeah.
Often can come in ways that feel like initiation and
Yes.
and challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that so much. So I would love to come back to then the piece about intuition, and specifically like how we work with intuition. I think because I think a lot of, again, secret witches can kind of be aware that they have this intuition, but maybe then start to fear trusting it or fear even hearing it because
Yeah.
of the, if we think back to the witch winged times and the witch burning times, like we were burned for being in touch with our intuition.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring up, like, the time of, like, the witches being burned and these things. I grew up in Massachusetts, so is very common to go to Salem, and they have a witch museum and the witch house. And so grew up with all of that. Yeah. Anyway, one of the things about it is there's twofold. One, I think that some of us, we still have some of that memory of other lifetimes, other experiences where we may have been harmed in some way for being healers. I mean, like, let's just call it what it is, right? I mean, like, these women were healers. And one time I heard a historian talk about this, and they were saying how, when you think of how crazy this is, right? Like, people were literally sick and didn't know how to heal it. And then these women who worked with the earth and worked with herbs would find these remedies, and they were killed for literally curing people. Like, something is wrong with you that you know how to cure us. I was like, that's wild when you think of it that way. But anyway,
that is wild. I've never
it
thought about
is
it like
like
that before.
you healed us, so something must be crazy. You must be a witch. Like, oh, how scary that you knew how to heal something. It's like,
it feels like that's still almost like in some ways, something that shows up in our culture. Like I've been journeying myself this week actually. So I've got a pain in my foot, and so I've been to the doctors. And I didn't realize what I was wearing at the time, but he was really funny with me, and he was like, "Well, just humor me and just take the anti-inflammatories." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to take the anti-inflammatories because I can heal myself." And he just was like really funny. And when I got home, I realized I was wearing my jumper, which said, "We are the granddaughters of the witches that you could not burn." It's like, oh, that makes a lot more sense now.
It was like, oh, she's one of those now. But really, though, like, it is funny to think, like, that was really the problem. It's not like these women were causing havoc. They were actually creating solution, and that's what was problematic.
Yes.
But anyway, I digress. So, like, with the intuition piece, I think now, even aside from the potential of having those memories, there's a lot of weight and responsibility, I think, around the idea of being intuitive or connecting into your psychic ability, because then it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be able to see this person's path or how to heal. I'm supposed to know. And I think that puts a lot of burden of responsibility on people that can be scary. The idea that you may be looked to as someone who can know or see beyond what is already known or understood. And, of course, that's just like one facet of intuition. We could use our intuition just to trust which direction to go on our path for the day, right? It doesn't have to be that big, that heavy. But the other thing with it too, I think a lot of people are afraid or will shut down their ability because of the expectation of what it means. So a lot of people may think like, oh no, I don't want to see an apparition. I don't want to be able to see like a ghost in the room, when that's not the only function of your intuition, or it's not the only mode of sensory. And then you'll have people who commonly feel very intuitively, like they can feel and sense things, but then they don't claim that they're intuitive because they think intuitive means that I see things visually. So there's this,
I love that.
I think there's a lot of confusion around it. A lot of story, like we say with a lot of things, there's a lot of story around it. I think that keep people out of relationship, or keep them at the very least from understanding their inherent gift. So hopefully, as we keep talking, because think about in our lifetime, Nicole, like, you would used to have to go to some weird metaphysical shop somewhere that was hidden in some town to find a book. And now you can find tarot cards sold at like the airport. You know what I mean? Like, we're having these conversations now, but I say that to say, hopefully we will even become more expanded in the understanding of just what intuition is, and the different facets of it, so that there is less fear and expectation, and people can just
I
explore.
love that. Yeah, I love that so much, because I think also when we have learned that we're sensitive or labeled shy or anxious or whatever it is that we've learned, our label is as a little girl, like we learn to make that wrong. And then because of that, we then make our intuition wrong, or our capacity to connect to our intuition wrong. Like you're saying, like there's different ways to hear and feel our intuition. Um, but if we can't do it the way that we think is expected, that becomes wrong. Like
Right.
we're operating from that story of like we are fundamentally wrong. So I love that point that you shared around like there being different ways into
Yes.
intuition. Mm.
You know, the other thing you just reminded me of, you know, how the witchy movies that we've all come to love over time. I can't
Mm.
think of anyway, all of them always have at least like 3 to 4 witches in the group of friends or in the
Mm-hmm.
coven or whatever it may be. And they all have a different gift. They
Mm.
and then it's like they come together and their gifts intertwining create like a super magic sort of thing, right? So it's like
Mm.
they have their powers individually, but they come together when they really need to get something done to, you know,
Mhm.
heighten it all. And it's interesting if you look at that, they all function differently. They all have a unique gift. They all have,
Mhm.
you know, maybe an element that they work with, or they all have, I don't know, just a different relationship to the magic.
Mm.
Whereas now in, you know, real life, right? A lot of us will compare ourselves to other people
Mhm.
and think, well, she's good at XYZ. I'm not. So then I must not be, you know, doing this
Yeah.
right, or I must not be able or capable. But it's like, no, you're not meant to mimic her. You're meant
Mm.
to learn, you know, just have a different understanding of nature, of earth, of all of these different elements that are already part of you and see
Mm.
how they express through you.
Yeah.
Like, what is your unique magic that you bring to the table that you take the tools and the foundations that are passed on, but then there's a part of it that only you will unlock through your
Mhm.
own practice and through your own trust and through your getting to know you.
Mm.
So I hope a lot of women start to understand that more. There are facets of this that only you will unlock for yourself. And
Mm.
you can't do it just through the comparison because you might miss what your secret sauce is.
Yeah. I love that so much. It brings it back to that kind of unique gifts, unique magic,
Yeah,
unique remedy. Like we all have our own unique remedy here to
right.
share in the world. And I loved what you said about yeah, the I've forgotten exactly what it was now actually, but I just loved what you shared around like the uniqueness and us having our
Of the
own.
movies.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm. So yeah, I love that so much. What I'm wondering is if there's anything like kind of practical. So if people are listening and they're like, okay, this sounds great. This is just my medicine. Like how can people begin to, in a very kind of practical, tangible way, work more deeply with Reiki or energetic alchemy to begin that kind of self-awakening journey?
As boring as it sounds, honestly, meditation is it. If if I could only practice one thing, it would be meditation. And the
Mm.
reason is because one, no matter what system or practices I've studied, meditation was always at the foundation. So it was
Mm.
always this starting point of you have to come into connection with yourself. You have to learn to ground. You have to learn to focus the mind. You have to be in relationship to body. And if you think about it, I mean, your body is how you are able to sense all of this intuitively, non-physical and physical. I mean, it's incredible when you think about that.
Mm.
The body lets you experience and perceive in both a material and a non-physical way. So of course you
Mm.
want to be tuned in to your vessel and have understanding of how you are perceiving at all of these different levels, right? But meditation is a beautiful practice if it's something you can do even 5 minutes a day, because not only will you train yourself to come into the body and have an awareness of yourself, you also then start to learn to expand the mind where you don't become so rigid that you shut out or ignore or don't pay attention to what is surrounding you in the various ways that earth and the universe and divine intelligence speaks.
Mm.
So I think meditation is again, it's not so glamorous, but it really is like a powerful key to all of this work, no matter which direction you want to go in it. It's going to
Mm,
help you to recognize, you even mentioned earlier, being an individual while
mm,
at the same time being one with all there is.
I love that. Yeah. And what about because I'm just thinking, the secret witches that I know have kind of journeyed with me. Often there can be this sense of when we go into meditation, this sense of like almost like trying to make it logical and trying to like get rid of all our thoughts
Yeah.
and so what I'm hearing and what you're sharing is like meditation as a coming into the body.
Mhm.
Does that feel
Coming
true?
in, yes, coming in and then expanding the mind.
Yes.
So it's a coming into the self first, not leaving that piece of the
Mm.
puzzle out.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times we think with intuition and even meditation, again, while it is very mind focused, of course, there's a lot, it can become very heady and there can
Mm.
be a lot of effort where really it's initially at the foundation a practice of surrender. So I
Mm.
always tell people, just sit and close your eyes. Let's just drop the title meditation and just
Mm.
observe like you're watching a movie. The more
Mhm.
you can let go of trying and just be like, oh, I'm just watching the movie, which is to say, pay attention to the sensation you feel. What does it feel
Mm.
like to breathe? If you just observe your body, like what does it feel like internally? What does the
Mm.
air around you feel like on your skin? Just start observing in a state of silence with your eyes closed.
Yeah, I love that.
And that brings you into the state where you start to surrender enough that naturally, not only are you here with yourself, but then the mind can then expand into those other realms of awareness. And
Mm.
then that's where we start having like, all kinds of wild mystical experiences within the realm of meditation. But yeah, I mean, I think if you start with it being a practice of surrender, the
Mm.
other stages of it will come
Yeah, I
and
love
it'll
that.
be better. Yeah.
I especially like how you described that the kind of observation piece, like start with the sensations and kind of go from there. But what came to me actually as you were talking was how yoga really is a practice to help our
Prepare.
bodies prepare
Yeah.
for meditation. So
Yes.
it's like yes, I love that exploration as well. Yeah. Let me just see if there was anything else that I kind of had in mind to speak to you about because I've not actually looked at any of my notes, or it seems that I've asked you everything on here anyway.
This is like our conversation when you came. I think I had an idea of what I wanted to ask you, but the conversation just it flowed as it did, and I don't think I got to anything on the paper.
No, I know exactly. Yeah, I think this feels like a really good place to complete. Actually, I think one of the things actually just before we do is that I heard in what you were saying was like there's a real importance. This is something that I feel is true from my perspective as well. Is that there's like a real importance in really going into our own self healing so that we can expand into helping others heal.
Yeah.
And also a sense of like, if we learn to come at healing and being a healer from that perspective, like we learn that everybody is responsible for their own healing,
Yes.
which then kind of also helps us with that fear that we can have about taking that level of responsibility for
Yeah.
healing others. And I think that's also something that's quite a nuance in the world of healing because we've been taught it's the other way around in some ways.
Yes. And not only, Nicole, does it give us this freedom of not feeling responsible to heal everyone else, but I think it also gives us the space to allow people to be on their own journeys. Because
Mm,
that can often be very challenging for healers where we're like, we know we can see what will help you, but then
mm,
we're often disappointed if people don't want to take that medicine, so to speak. And
mm,
it's like, but they have their own journey and it may look different than what we would expect it to be or what we know could be supportive for them. So
mm,
there's also this like respecting of everyone's healing journey may look different. And even people we look at and we think they're not healing, that's not necessarily true. Like we all
mm,
came here to heal and evolve. But
mm,
again, it has many faces. And I always have to bring myself back to what did my journey look like and what was I learning prior to what I am exploring now. So it's not like
mm,
I was only expanding as a human once I came into this work. it has
Yes.
made it much more magical, for lack of a better word. It really has. I'm so thankful for this work because, man, has it changed my perspective on everything. But
Mm.
even prior to this, life, no matter what you may think of it, it was still helping you to evolve to get to where you are now,
Mm.
to be sitting here and us having these conversations.
Yeah, I love that because it's a sense of like, and what it reminds me of is the sense of like for some time that there's almost like an unconscious period of
Yeah.
healing. And then we
Yes.
get to a point where we're like, okay, now I'm going to choose into this consciously.
Yes.
And I think
Exactly.
you and I spoke to that a little bit before, and we spoke to it earlier even in that sense of like, I can't remember what it was you said now, but there was a sense of like, I'm already creating. I'm just creating from these
Yes.
old stories.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gorgeous. Okay. Well, I was having a look at your website earlier and saw your magical card deck. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about where people can find you and how they can work with you if they are called to go deeper.
Yes. So you can find me. My website is theenergeticalchemist.com. On social media, on Instagram specifically, I'm at Reiki Radio, and that's the name of the podcast. So if you want to listen to the podcast, just Reiki Radio on any podcast platform. The deck, though, it's funny. It's sitting next to me in the card up top is the
Oh,
Alchemist.
oh, of course. I
The
love
Alchemist card, I know,
that.
right? Of course it is. But yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about, how, exploring all these different layers, all of these different practices, I think they reveal different layers of ourselves. And with tarot, I fell in love with the Fool's Journey, the major arcana.
Mm,
And I was also in love with the freedom of Oracle. So I decided to create a deck that highlighted the major expression or the major arcana cards. But
mm,
then the Oracle side of it, I wanted to have the cards really focus primarily on these paths, everything we've been talking about.
mhm,
So not necessarily like, hey, am I going to start dating Bob? But, what am I experiencing in this path of awakening? What am I experiencing in this illumination? Why does it feel like absolute hell sometimes, right? So
mm,
all of the cards really point to the journey of the alchemist, which I guess you would call the secret witches. I call us the alchemists.
mm.
Same thing though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted a deck that really supported us through these journeys and having different ways of looking at what we explore and what we experience.
I love that so much. You've just reminded me that I think the tagline on the Secret Witch Show or the intro to it is "Live Your Wild Alchemy." So
Ah, yes,
I'd forgotten that
perfect.
though. So that was really beautiful. I love that so much. I'm almost feeling like there's a question. I know we've kind of completed, but it feels like there's because somebody was sharing when I asked for the questions, whether there are any questions in the group. Somebody was
Yeah,
sharing about how they were harnessing Reiki. And they said, I'll just share what they said because there's no question in it, but it might spark something that's worth speaking to. And they said, I think of Reiki and energetic healing as going into wounds and sensations in the body and using energy to heal those. But I just had an idea to use it differently, to use energy and my hands, a bit like Reiki, but to open up joy, expression, and pleasure in the body. Feels like it's what my body craves is to express joy. So I was inspired to do that. I know that's not a question, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that sparks for you.
yeah. So a couple of things. One, I think what's fascinating about studying energy, just period, is we start to recognize obviously like there's energy everywhere. Everything is energetic, right? Everything has
Mm,
an energetic resonance, everything. And so whether we're aware of it or not, we are constantly working energy, right? It's just like
mm,
how we're doing it consciously or unconsciously. And so you can't not be an energy worker just by
mm.
nature of our design. So I love that the person
Yeah.
highlighted that we have choice in how we
Mm,
actually work with energy. And yeah, we absolutely do. And it makes me think of how I always say how you show up in expression is part of your energy work, right? So,
mm,
like if I show up into a room and I am personally focused on my joy, as they say, or I'm personally like in that space of like, what, I feel good and my heart is open and I'm going to be just open to the experience of whatever is here in this room.
mm.
how you are showing up is contributing to the energy of the room,
Mhm.
the energy of the environment, the energy of everyone there.
Mm.
But on the other side of the fence, if you decide to show up, excuse me, but as an asshole, that also is going to be a contribution. Do you see what I mean? Like, it really is.
Mm. I
So
love
it's like,
that. I love that so much. I often describe it as like we're always the remedy that we've come here to
yeah,
embody. We're always expressing the remedy that we are.
yes,
It's just we'll either be expressing it from wounding or from joy, from
exactly,
gold, from the healed expression.
exactly.
I love that
Yes,
so much. Yeah,
yeah.
love
So
that.
yeah, I love what they wrote because I think it really points
Mm.
to the consciousness, the awareness
Yes.
that we have around, like, how do I want to be in expression?
Mm.
And, to your point, even a lot of how we are expressing is directly correlated to how much we have been in relationship with our wounds. Did
Yeah.
we actually sit with them? Are we allowing that compassion and healing for ourselves that allows us to
Mm.
be in a different frequency or different expression? So,
Yes. So
yeah.
that we can create more consciously from the gifts and the gold.
Yes,
Mm.
you have a lot. This is the thing I always say, like, jokingly, but I mean it really. I'm like, what kind of magician are you being? Because
Mm.
we're all magicians, so to speak.
Yeah.
We all can manipulate energy. We can manipulate minds. We can manipulate emotion. We are manipulators, period. And I know people don't like the word, but the truth is, even
Mm.
love manipulates, it changes the texture of energy, right? And so, but it's like, but what kind of magician are you being? Are
Mm.
you being unconscious, just whipping around this wand and creating chaos and doing, like,
Mm.
as
Which the
we
secret
do?
witch loves to do, by the way. I'm speaking
Yes.
from
And
personal experience.
as we do, as we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's also, if I'm consciously aware that I have these gifts of magic, I can
Mm.
also come into relationship with how I want to use my magic at any given time.
Yeah.
And that's just so much more empowering. And it brings us back into that place of not feeling like life is happening to us, but
Mm.
rather recognizing we are in relationship with every level of expression that exists.
Yeah, I love that so much. There's also, so I know that we keep keep it going. We've done the exit, but it's fine. We'll keep going if that's all good with you.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking about and contemplating because speaking about the power to essentially manifest what we desire and how that
Yeah.
then also plays into the physical side of things. Because I know a lot of times people work with Reiki and energy healing for a physical healing perspective.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to that because I'm of the belief that as we heal what's kind of deeper emotionally and spiritually, that then manifests differently into the body, which is where the
Right.
physical healing comes from. And I'm just wondering your perspective on that as well before we finally complete.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, we could talk for days,
I
honey.
know.
I'm here. Yeah. So yes, so this is where I think the mind body connection is so important to realize in this work.
Mm,
And it's funny, a lot of people don't know. Oopsie. Sorry. A lot of people don't know, but the actual name, the full name of Reiki is Shinshin Kaizen Usui Reiki Roho. And it
mm,
means Usui Reiki treatment method to improve body and mind. So
mm,
body is right there. It's not just the energy, right? But the
mm,
the point of this is, to your point, what we hold in consciousness and what we hold in emotion, the body is the container, right? The
mm,
body is so, gosh, if anything, people, all of us, get in relationship to the body because it's the magic
mm,
wand, so to
mhm,
speak, right?
mhm, mhm,
So, yeah. So anyway, everything that we experience in our consciousness, which is going to also be in relationship to our emotional body, the physical body is going to experience all of that. How
mm,
you choose to see things, how it is you feel about things. The body is like, oh, okay, that's how we're going to carry this, right?
mm.
And so when we use Reiki or relay hands, which is actually a way of directing the mind, just as a side note, where you lay your hands is where your mind goes, yeah? Um, but it unlocks a lot of what has been repressed. So whether what has been repressed in memory, in mind, in feeling, in emotion, and then all of a sudden those aspects of consciousness or even energy, we could say, is allowed to move through the body instead of being stuck and stagnant in the body. And so not only then does the mind become more expressive and free, but then the physical body is like, oh my gosh, like now I'm not holding that junk. I can be free in how I feel. So there's this interconnectedness between mind, body, energy, emotion, spirit. You can't disconnect it. It makes me think of a pentagram, right? Like you have the 5 elements, but at the top is spirit or ether, however you want to look at it. But it's like that divine intelligence, if it is that is what is governing our mind, our emotion, our water, fire, air, earth, right? If we have that ether governing all of our other elements, that's what brings us into harmonious balance. Whereas those of you that may be familiar, tarot again, it's coming to mind, but the devil card, he has the inverted pentagram. So instead of spirit being on top, it is being ruled by the elements rather than you ruling your own, which kind of even brings back to, for people who are very empathic, don't allow yourself to be possessed by feeling, emotion, other people's energies, environments, all these things, when you really have the ability to be the one who governs and manages all of it. And I know it sounds like, but listen, we know this work takes work, right? But ultimately, that's what we are capable of. And I don't even know if I answered your question now, but
yeah, no, you
but
definitely
that's
did.
where it took my
You
mind.
definitely did. And I also love the depth to which you dive into all of this as well. I do think that is part of your gift as well. So just to share that, like I absolutely love the depth, the depths to which you explore Reiki. So yeah, I think that's really gorgeous. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I loved it.
Oh, thank you, Nicole, again for round 2. It was so much fun just sitting and chatting with you. And I hope that they will also check out your conversation, learn more about you on Reiki Radio, because it was such a magical conversation and with everything that you shared.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, actually, maybe we'll put that in the show notes as well. We can
Yeah.
put the link to Reiki Radio, the particular episode. We'll put all the other links as well. But yeah, wonderful. Okay, my love. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, doll.
As ever, I absolutely loved this episode. It just felt magical and deep. Here are my takeaways. When we first feel a call to energetic alchemy, we can feel alone in our journey. We might know that we're sensitive, but we can feel weird or odd in that. Energy healing can help us begin to understand this aspect of ourselves, in whatever form that takes. Reiki is a tool that can help us find a way into energy healing, and it can be interacted with differently to how we commonly know it to be harnessed. In other words, we can harness energetic alchemy for ourselves rather than simply outsourcing our healing to others. And in doing so, we can own our power to peel back layers and go on an inner journey of self-awakening and transformation. There is an interconnectedness between mind, body, and spirit. We can't disconnect it. And as we begin to look inwards to what's been suppressed, healing manifests on all levels. Energy healing helps us learn that we can choose that process consciously. Energetic alchemy can help us reclaim the gifts of being a sensitive woman and learn how to distinguish our energy from others, empowering our own self-regulation and intuition. Not everyone will experience their intuition in the same way. Some are visual, some feel things, some know things, and as we become more aware of our own sensitivities and gifts, we can learn to embrace our intuition more fully. There's an importance in ascending into a spiritual path to see what's the same, and also surrendering to being the physical vessel that collects the rain, aka descending into the body and embracing our uniqueness. All energetic alchemy tools are bringing us home to both of these things.